Hi, welcome everyone joining and watching 2025's first Enrichment Week. Welcome to the first session, which is on a career as an accountancy tutor. And I am delighted to be joined by Andy Bradley, who's the head of academic delivery at Kaplan. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Andy to tell you a little bit more about his own career journey to start the session. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Poppy. Good morning, everybody. I think it is still good morning for everybody. I've not seen anybody joining from a different time zone. Pleasure to be with you all this morning. I'd completely forgotten that I have the pressure of going first in this first Enrichment Week of 2025. So I shall do my best to make you want to come back for more later in the week if you haven't already booked any further sessions. Really good to see that we've got about 40 people who presumably have some degree of interest in becoming a financial educator at some point in your career, which is really, really good, really promising. I hope you've been inspired by some of my tutors who have been teaching you during your apprenticeship so far. So what are we going to cover in this session? And as Poppy said, please do feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Poppy's going to stop me at the end of every slide and ask me any questions that have cropped up to that point. So don't be shy. Please do use the chat panel, as she said, and I'll do my best to answer any queries that you've got. There's no such thing as a silly question, so please do ask away. So what are we going to cover in this short session? A little bit about me. Who am I? What have I done before, if you like? How did I get to where I am now? Then we're going to cover a little bit about making the transition from being an accountant to being an educator, because there's quite a few misconceptions about what that entails and what you have to come with if you want to become a tutor. So we'll try and put some of those misconceptions to bed a little bit. And then we'll talk about what skills you need. So what should you be having a think about to see whether you're likely to be suited to a career in education once you have completed your apprenticeship and passed your accountancy qualifications.
Sorry, Andy, I can only see half of your screen of your slide. I think that might be the same for everybody else. Just that.
What, left side, right side?
Both, so we can just see the. Oh, so that's fine. They can all see all of it. Perfect, great. As long as everyone else can see. Thank you for letting me know. Go ahead.
All right, no worries. And then lastly, the joys and challenges of being an accountancy tutor. It is a very joyful job, but like every job, it does have its challenges. And so we'll quickly talk through those as well. So who am I? So in terms of education and background, I am from a fairly disadvantaged background. I was the first person from my primary school that ever went to university, something that my parents were very proud of. So I was the first year that ever did GCSEs back in 1988. Don't like to say that too loudly. Then did A-levels, then went off to Lancaster University, where I did an accountancy degree, which is probably one of the few regrets I've got in my career because as you are now finding, many of you, there's absolutely no need to have done accountancy at university in order to become an accountant. And then I took a year off after university and I went off to be a holiday rep, a job I probably would have done for much longer if the pay had been better, because that was a really enjoyable year doing that. And then I thought I'd better get serious and grow up a bit and get a job. And so I trained, I did ICAEW, so the ACCA qualification as it's now called, and I did that whilst working for Price Waterhouse. Notice I didn't say PwC, that's how old I actually am. So it was before the merger of Price Waterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand happened. I worked primarily in audit for most of my training contract. I did about 6 months working in corporate finance. Decided that definitely wasn't for me. And then post-qualification, I did a year in internal training in Price Waterhouse before I left and came to what is now Kaplan. And then I have been here tomorrow. I have been here for 27 years. which is quite a long time. So I've spent more than half of my life here working at Kaplan, which I hope is a solid bit of evidence as to what a joyous job it is working in accountancy education. And one of the main things that has kept me here for such a long time are the various and varied opportunities that I've had to do different things over that time. So I started off, as everybody does, as a tutor. So I started off working in the Leeds office, teaching across ICAEW, ACCA, CIMA, AAT. And when I first started, I taught a lot of management accounting subjects and sort of financial management subjects. So if you are, I think most people on the call today are studying ACA or ACCA, so financial management in both those subjects, both those qualifications. I taught that. If you're doing chartered, I taught BST. If you're doing ACCA, I taught what's now SBL, that sort of stuff. But I always wanted to teach audit because I really do love it. And those of you that have studied some audit papers may well think that's a bit strange, but I really do love it. And if you've ever been in my audit classes, you'll know that I love it. So I started picking up a bit of audit. And then within 2 or 3 years, started taking on some other responsibilities alongside teaching. So I was a course manager in Leeds. I looked after what's the professional stage of ICAEW now, making sure that all the courses that we ran smoothly. I was also a client manager, so I spent a lot of time looking after what is now Deloitte in Leeds for a couple of years. And then eventually I got a promotion and I moved back home to Hull and became the centre manager of Hull. So that meant I was responsible for everything that happened in the Hull centre, running it essentially as a small business. So drumming up business, looking after the clients that we had, doing the accounts and the budgets and the forecasting, looking after the staff, as well as still teaching. Did that for a few years, and then I got a different job and became head of AAT for the whole company. So that was a mixture of liaising with the AAT, used to go to see the AAT down in London quite often, making sure that our AAT product was as good as it could be and what learners and clients wanted, as well as making sure it's profitable. And again, being responsible for the whole sort of revenue of AAT within the company. I then helped set up our internal training function within the company. So for our academic staff, we have a pretty well-developed training program that takes people through from day one right through to being here as long as I have. And I helped sort of formalise that and set it up a few years ago. And then back in 2022, became the head of academic delivery, which is what I am now, which basically means all of those tutors that you have come across in your various courses are all part of my team. So don't look after sort of revenue and things anymore, don't look after a location, but manage all of the tutors across the country. And all the while still teaching. But nowadays, because I don't teach as much, I only teach audit. So you can imagine how happy that's made me, because I've told you how much I enjoy teaching audit. So I teach ACCA audit insurance, advanced audit insurance, and then at the minute for ICAEW, I just teach the assurance paper. But that might change with the new next generation ACA coming in shortly. So as you can see there, I have done lots of different things at Kaplan. And what I've not mentioned on that slide is I've also spent a lot of time overseas. I love travel, as anybody at Kaplan who knows me knows. And I've had the opportunity through this job to visit places all over the world that I perhaps would never have been to before, or for any other reason. So I used to teach a lot in Cyprus, and I've presented at conferences on behalf of ICAEW and ACCA I probably can't remember them all now, but I've been to China, I've been to Bangladesh, been to India, been to Botswana, been to Zambia, been to South Africa. So yeah, it's been brilliant. I'm not sure that I can think of any of the jobs that would have afforded me quite those opportunities. So that's who I am. I don't think we've got any questions yet, have we, Pop? I can't see any that
no, none.
Great stuff. So, how do you go from being an accountant to being a financial educator? We'll talk about what's different first of all. 27 years on, and I still am joyous that I haven't filled out a timesheet for 27 years. Were you expecting me to put that first? Probably not, but it was always a big thing for me. I hated filling in timesheets when I worked in practice. And it's sort of it's just a bit of evidence about the freedom that we have in this job. We don't have people watching over us all the time. We don't need to account for our time in quite the same way that perhaps you have to do in your current role. Making a difference at a personal level. Now, obviously, in accountancy, we're always adding value. We're adding value to businesses. We're adding value to other businesses if we work for a professional services firm. So, of course, we're always adding value. But working in education, you're making a difference at a really personal level. Whenever I welcome a new tutor into our faculty, I always say to them that I still get a real buzz out of results days. I love hearing from the people that I've taught when they get their results, telling me how they've done, and then telling me when they've qualified and completed their apprenticeship, and then seeing them in future roles years after we've taught them. That is a real buzz, very much like school teachers who can see that in their learners and what they go on to do when they finish school. It's absolutely fantastic having a job where you can see that you have in some way contributed to people's futures and their successes. Creating opportunities. So again, it's sort of linked to that. But when you see people, especially when you've been doing it as long as I have, go on and, I see them now on LinkedIn and they're finance director or, head of this and head of that. And you just think, yeah, it was brilliant to see that through the studying you did with us, with me, we helped you get on that ladder and helped you get on that track to success, which is really rewarding. On a more timely and sort of instant level, you are probably very well aware of how often we ask for your feedback on our courses at the end of each course. And every single tutor in the faculty, I can guarantee it, loves reading that feedback. And when people write nice comments and when you get nice scores, it gives you a real buzz. And obviously, in a lot of roles, not saying all, but in a lot of roles outside of being an educator and doing that sort of thing, you don't get that feedback quite that often in quite the same way. I would hope you all get told you're doing a good job, but it's lovely when we get our end of course feedback. Lots of freedom, as I mentioned already. Basically, once people come and work for us and we've trained them up, it's their responsibility to do the best job that they can in the classroom, but we don't have people watching over them all the time, checking whether they're doing it. We don't want to know where everybody is every minute of the working day. And for a lot of people, that freedom is a real positive, that you're allowed to get on with it, knowing that the support is there if you need it, but not having to explain yourself all the time. But what's similar to the jobs that you might be doing now? Well, obviously using your accountancy skills that you are building up through your studies and also through your work experience. Our job in the classroom, as I hope you are seeing when you join classes, is to bring this this technical stuff to life with our experiences of having done it before we became educators. Teamwork. We're only as good as we are because we help each other a lot, and I'm sure that's the same in your current roles. What I love to see in the faculty is everybody sharing experiences, sharing ideas, sharing new approaches to teaching, helping people out when they're new, helping people out if they're picking up something they've not taught before, helping people out if they're struggling a little bit. We are a fantastic example of teamwork in our faculty, and I'm sure that's the same way you are as well. It's a really sociable job. It has to be. Because we have to stand up I'll talk about it in a minute, we have to stand up at the front and present and be like actors. And I think that draws in people of a certain characteristic. And it has always been and continues to be a very sociable place to work. We have a lot of fun, we have a lot of laughs while we're doing the job, which is great. And I hope that's the same as where you work. And just pause in case there are any questions. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so if you already fancied this as a job, and if I've whetted your appetite a little bit more, what do we look for in people to become good financial educators and to inspire the next generation? Preparation. there is a vast amount of preparation goes into all of the teaching that we do. And that is itself a skill. You've got to be fairly self-disciplined to sit quietly on your own for quite a lot of time when you first start, getting your head right under the detail of the subjects, not just from a technical perspective, but thinking, how am I going to deliver that? How can I make that interesting? How can I make it simple? How can I make it fun? So there is a lot of time spent preparing, and that, as I say, is something you've got to have a lot of self-discipline to do, and to do well. Passion. You've probably all been taught by a selection of people at Kaplan, and you've probably, well, you will have been taught by a lot of people since you first started school. You'll have your favourites, and you'll have some that perhaps stick in your head for less good reasons. Hopefully none of them at Kaplan. But what makes learning easier is if you've been taught by somebody who's passionate. And to be fair, quite a lot of the stuff you have to learn as an accountant is not intrinsically the most exciting stuff ever. But the best tutors have a real passion for doing it. And that comes across in their teaching. That comes across in the things their learners say about them, and how they've made that learning journey so much easier because of that passion. So you've got to want to do it, and you've got to want to do it the best that you possibly can. Strong work ethic. We all work really hard as tutors. We all teach a lot. We spend a lot of time preparing, as I've said, and then outside of all of that, we spend a lot of time helping learners outside of the classroom. So it's definitely requires people who want to put the time in to get to be the best tutor that they can, to support the learners as much as those learners might need. Flexibility. So I've mentioned no timesheets, and I've mentioned the flexibility that gives us. The flip side of that, of course, is you've got to be good at time management. You've got to be good at managing your own time. We're a really seasonal business. So although it's not quite like it used to be, most courses happen sort of from April onwards, which means that people spend a lot of their time in January, February, March getting ready for the year ahead. And you've got to be really strong with yourself to do that, and not just think, oh, I'll do it later in the year. Because things happen later in the year, and then you sort of get pushed and you get under a bit of pressure. So knowing when your peaks are, when your troughs are, trying to get things done in advance, and having the ability to make those decisions to do that for yourself is really, really a key part of it. Resilience. I think all jobs require resilience nowadays, don't they? But again, part of that seasonality is come the autumn, when we've got all those new intakes. You're teaching pretty much every day during the week for a few weeks on end there, and so looking after your health, making sure that you get plenty of sleep, and making sure that you look after your voice, because we talk a lot, and all that sort of things to get you through the busier times is really important. Compassion, a really important skill. Learners, as you know, are under pressure. They've got a lot going on in their lives. Not everybody sails through these apprenticeships. Not everybody finds them easy. And so being compassionate with people, understanding the pressures that they're under, understanding why people haven't, at the first pass, understood everything that you've said when you thought you'd made it really easy, and helping people to get through what for them are quite challenging times is a really, really important skill. Imagination. They always say one of the best things that a teacher can do is to find different ways of explaining things. Making the difficult simple is what we always say our job is about. It's not the easiest thing in the world, is it, accountancy? But our job is to make it as simple and as straightforward so that learners can understand it. And then just to blast a few misconceptions, and I can see there's something in the chat panel, so I'll hand over to Poppy in a second. But people often think that you need to be an absolute accountancy guru. Oh, I need to have been passing all my exams with 90% or something if I'm going to teach other people how to be an accountant. Absolutely not. When you're learning, you're under pressure to pass. You've got a job to do at the same time. You're on perhaps quite short courses. It's a wonder anybody gets 90%. But when you're preparing to teach, you've got longer to do it. You're only focusing on a small number of subjects. It is your job, so it's not something you're doing alongside your job. You can still be brilliant at teaching if you didn't win an international prize or something when you're studying. So you absolutely don't have to be an accountancy guru. But you do have to have qualified. That is the only job requisition we actually have. because we tell all of our learners and we tell all of our clients that all of our tutors are qualified. But you don't have to have a teaching qualification either. Some of our tutors choose to study for an accountancy qualification at some point during their career. But unlike working in schools or colleges, we don't require everybody who comes to teach for us to have an teaching qualification. Nor do you have to have taught before. So I said I'd done about a year in internal training before I came to Kaplan. A few people in the faculty have done that, but the vast majority of our tutors had not taught before they came to work for us. So again, that's absolutely not something that you need to have done. Poppy, there's something in the Q&A, I think.
Yes, there is, and it kind of really nicely ties in with what you've just covered. So they've asked, I'm planning to become a tutor as soon as I qualify. What ways can younger and more recently qualified accountants bring a unique value compared to others who have years of accountancy experience under the belt?
That's a really good question, whoever's asked that. Thank you for asking it. Firstly, just a bit of a fact for you. The vast majority of tutors who come and work for us are newly qualified. We do get people who've done a few years post-qualification experience first. We do get a few people who've taught somewhere else first, but the vast majority of people come fairly soon after qualifying. And what I think people bring, well, certainly that technical knowledge is still very up to date because you've only just finished studying it yourself. And I think not saying that those of us who've been here a long time can't do this, but you have a natural empathy with the learners because it really isn't that long since you were sat where they're sat. And so you can probably still remember the tricks that you taught yourself or you learned to help you study, or how you made some rule stick in your head easily. And so it's certainly, you're a lot, if you like, closer to the experience that the learners are feeling at that point because you've only just been through it.
Thanks, Andy. And I think that you saying that they have a unique position is really important because they do. They can. You've been a student yourself, and now you're going to transition into a tutor. And where Andy's spoken about differentiating, you can really appreciate that because when you teach, you will appreciate the different styles that you probably wanted to be used when you were a student. Right. Now, one question. Oh, actually, we have another one that's come through.
Great.
Always the case when one person asks. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel fairly compensated compared to being an accountant in practice?
Oh, now that's a really involved question, to be fair, and it sounds like it isn't. Do I feel fairly compensated? Absolutely. Yeah. Is the simple answer to that question. You know, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. If you look at salaries in education compared to, you know, where you think you might end up if you continue to be an accountant, then, you know, finance directors, chief executive officers of huge companies will be earning fortunes that the vast majority of people in education don't earn. Did I ever aspire to be one of those people? No, I didn't. But do I feel fairly compensated? Absolutely. Otherwise, I won't have stayed here for 27 years. It's, you know, it's a good job with good pay. Yeah.
And do you have any more slides? Because we've got a couple more questions, but I'm mindful I don't want to, you know, stall you on your slides. Do you want me to keep the questions for after, or?
I'll speed up on this last slide, and then we'll do all the questions that we've got time for. If that's okay. So, bit of a summary really, but the joys I think I've pretty much covered. Seeing the difference you make to somebody's life is just fantastic. Getting the chance to perform, you know, they always say that tutors were actors who couldn't get a job in acting. I'm not sure that's true. But most of us still love standing up in front of a class of people and doing our stuff, doing our thing, and getting a real buzz out of that. And meeting so many people, I couldn't be anywhere near guessing how many people I've taught in 27 years, or how many colleagues I've met, or people I've met at conferences and stuff like that. But it's a great way to interact with so many different people over your career. Colleagues I've mentioned, I think it's probably the people that have kept me here for so long. Constant change. So if you're somebody who gets bored, you'd never be bored if you come into this sort of work, because we have things like qualification changes, syllabus updates. 10 years ago, we didn't have apprenticeships at the scale that we've got them now, and that was a big change. And the changes can't always be predicted. You know, now we're looking at things like AI and how we can build that into teaching and learning and stuff like that. there's always technological changes. So it's definitely a great job for people who fear they're going to get bored, because you never ever have the chance to get bored. Travel I've mentioned, if that's something that sort of floats your boat, and I've got to keep saying no timesheets because it's still a joy to me that I never have to fill in a timesheet. Challenges I've mentioned, managing your own time, the seasonality of the business, but for those of you that work in accountancy practices, you're probably very aware of that. So it's sort of reverse seasonality here. We're quieter in January, February, March because accountancy practices don't want to let people off for study because they're so busy, and if you work in industry, you're possibly doing year end. So we're really busy at the back end of the year and slightly less busy at the front end. I'm not taking it personally, and that's a link back to the feedback. You can't please everybody all the time, but most of us take any less than good feedback really personally. Even if 99% of your feedback is learners saying you've done a brilliant job for them, you'll always remember the one that didn't, and you have to learn to cope with that. I would say it's a challenge. So I think that was the last. Oh no, and the constant change. Some people thrive on change, some people don't. So I put it in both categories because some people like steady state, and some people like change. So you might see that as a joy, you might see it as a challenge. I think that was it. So yeah, let's see how many questions we can get through, Poppy.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll quickly run through them. So Freddie asks, how do you decide which tutors teach which subject?
Very much driven by business need at the time. So we generally, when we're recruiting, think we have a shortage in this particular location for this particular stream. In some of our bigger centres, so for example, London, we might be recruiting several tutors at a time. So we would always, where we can, take into account if people have taught before, what have they taught, or people's background. So perhaps if you've worked in accountancy practice and always worked in tax, then if you wanted to continue with that specialism, if the business need is such, then we would obviously take that into account. But it's driven by what we need at the time in the location.
Perfect. Next question is, by qualified, do you mean chartered?
Nope, we mean level 7 qualified. So we have tutors working for us who are ACA qualified, ACCA, CIMA, CTA qualified. So it's got to be sort of level 7 accountancy qualification or above, yeah. But it doesn't have to be ICAEW. That's all.
Okay. Next question. In terms of travel as a tutor, I mean, it sounds like you travel loads, Mandy. Does it depend on what qualifications you teach? For example, I know that ACCA is recognized globally, whereas in the USA, it's more exclusive with the CPA.
Yeah, so I would say the majority of the travel international travel we're talking about here, that I've done over my career was with the ACCA because it is the most global. But I have been abroad with ICAEW as well because that's an international qualification. So yeah, it just sort of varies, but it happened because of the fact I taught them both, not because I've got one particular qualification or another. So it again, depending on what you teach, but most of that international stuff came about because ACCA is all over the world.
Yeah, and we do have a talk on ACCA tomorrow, actually, and it covers the international side. So if anybody's interested in that, do attend that session. And the last question is, do any tutors just teach online rather than teaching at a centre as well?
No. No, we don't have live online only contracts. So no, everybody teaches in the classroom. Some people, depending on the location, will find that they do more online teaching because they might be in a smaller centre where we don't have as many classroom courses. Other centres, the bigger centres, the tutors will do less live online because there's a lot more classroom courses to cover, but everybody does a mixture.
Amazing. Well, that was all the questions, Andy. Thank you so much. I think you've set a really good synopsis of what teaching looks like, and I think there are definitely more rewards and advantages than challenges.
Definitely, absolutely, yeah. So I hope that has covered what people wanted, and I look forward to in future years seeing some people asking us for a job.
Definitely. It looks like loads of people are interested. And I have just shared a link for feedback on today's session. So please use that to give us some feedback. As Andy said, it's about, what you want to do and what you want our sessions to cover as well. And tell us what you enjoyed about today's session, but also if you want to know anything else about today's session, or you didn't get the opportunity to ask any questions, then please use that form to do that. And I will relay those questions to Andy separately.
Brilliant. And the one thing I would advise anybody, if you continue to be interested in this, just speak to your tutors when you come to class. Ask them anything and let them know that you're interested. That's the easiest way to find out more about it because everybody's got a slightly different take. and the tutors love talking about the job. So.
Yeah, great advice. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Andy, for your time, and everybody else for giving up your time to attend today's session. Hope to see more of everybody in the rest of the week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.